Kevin, Perry Eliano is no longer employed at Ohio State. Your thoughts about the safeties coach being let go?
Yeah, we knew change was coming, and there's some names that I think that everybody was talking about, and there's some names that nobody was really talking about, and I think we classify Perry Eliano a little bit more to the latter. But you do look, and Eliano's recruiting was not, it hurts with Tim Walton blowing the curve. I mean, Tim Walton is recruiting very well, and it probably just makes things look a little bit worse for Perry Eliano at that point. I think that Ohio State safety play was good, not great. I mean, I think last year we saw a lot of good things from the defense as a whole, even if it was not nearly as aggressive as maybe it needed to be, finding a happy medium between 22 and 23. And, I think that some moves just have to be made as Ohio State tries to balance out its coaching roster in terms of who's on offense and who's on defense. And, I'm sure there's time for speculation as what other moves could be. But, Perry Eliano was a corners coach at Cincinnati. They move him to safeties at Ohio State. When you have this situation of where you don't have enough guys at certain positions. I mean, I don't know if I'm necessarily a big proponent of having a corners coach and a safeties coach. I would probably rather have a secondary coach and be able to knock off some other boxes at other positions. But Ohio State had the expiring contract with Eliano and chose not to re-up, and here we are.
Yeah, I think I saw somebody say, I can't believe that Eliano was fired before Parker Fleming. Right now, Ohio State still has 5 coaches under contract. That's Brian Hartline has 2 years left. Jim Knowles has 1 year left. Tim Walton has 1 year left. Parker Fleming has 1 year left. Keenan Bailey has 1 year left. Everybody else, their contracts have expired, so they'll either get renewed or not get renewed. Perry Eliano's contract was not renewed. That's a lot easier than firing somebody with time still on their contract. So I think that's one of the reasons. I also think another reason why this one was announced is because a lot of people were asking, in terms of media, were asking Ohio State about this because this was out there that this was happening. So this was one that I guess they went ahead and confirmed in terms of, yeah, he's not coming back. I don't know if they're not being pressed as much on others because it's not necessarily out there yet. But I think part of this was just answering a question that a bunch of reporters were asking. And so that's why this one was announced when it was, perhaps.
Perry Eliano was one of the nicest people you'd ever meet. He always had a smile on his face, shook your hand, looked you in the eye, chatted you up, and generally did the best he could to assimilate into the Ohio State culture as far as I could tell. I think that recruiting was probably the area where he was deficient. Isn't it true that KJ Bolden, one of the top safety prospects in the country, was related to him, and he didn't land him and didn't land a couple of other highly rated safeties? And so, I don't want to say they took lesser players, but they took players that maybe weren't rated as high as some of those other guys at the safety position. And safety in this Jim Knowles defense, at least for the first part of this season until Lathan Ransom got hurt, they were playing 3 safeties on almost every snap. And then when Lathan Ransom got hurt, it was kind of a blend between a third safety and a third corner because you really couldn't keep Jordan Hancock off the field there at the end of the season. So because he was playing so well. So to me, it was a surprise. I thought Lathan Ransom, up until when he got hurt, was playing at an all Big Ten caliber level. I thought Josh Proctor was pretty good. Sonny Styles, I'd have to go really back and do a deep dive and rewatch a lot of the games and just figure out what was going on with Sonny Styles. Like where does he fit in? Is he used properly? He had 53 tackles. I know that in 13 games. I envision him with his size, his speed, his athletic ability. This is a guy that should be getting 7 to 8 tackles a game and 1 or 2 tackles for loss and occasionally rushes the passer with his speed. And I just, again, it's hard to fault Jim Knowles because the final product was so good to only give up 12 points a game or whatever it was that it ended up. And it was such an improvement over the previous years. But only Jim Knowles and Ryan Day worked with Perry Eliano every day. And if it was something more than the recruiting aspect of it, I'm not sure what it was because I don't sit in those meetings and know. I know this is a guy that made Sauce Gardner an All-American at Cincinnati, and a couple other guys down there really put him in the NFL, won big games, et cetera. And, I don't think he'll be out of work very long. So sad to see him go just because he was such a great person. I think Tony's kind of hit the nail on the head. The contractual obligations, it kind of goes beyond Ryan Day just saying, I don't want you to be here anymore. Their legal department's got to kind of get involved when somebody's got a contract for another year, and they got to eat that contract money. It's not something that anybody really wants to do. So does that put him in a lurch here on what they want to do with the staff? I'm not sure, but he's going very slowly with this. I think Perry Eliano probably wanted it clarified as much as anybody else because the coaches convention was this past weekend in Nashville, and it gave him an opportunity to go down there and reacquaint himself with a lot of friends in the profession and say, hey, I'm going to be looking for a job. Keep an eye out for me to some of the top people. And I presume he'll be at a Power 5 school tomorrow, I would think, but tomorrow being a relative term, but before spring football. So I don't have any doubt about that.
Something else that I'd heard thrown around too was that there was, getting back to Sonny Styles, I've heard people plug him in on all three levels, whether or not he's a safety, a linebacker, or an edge rusher. And I know that Eliano certainly didn't want to lose him from the safety room. I think that Jim Knowles, I certainly had heard the rumors that Jim Knowles would like to have moved him down or something. So, maybe there were also some philosophical differences that were in play as well as to where certain personnel needed to be and how things work there. And, it's a challenge with all of that. And, if you have somebody that sees things one way and you see it another way, sometimes you have to sit there and there has to be a break because everybody's got to be facing in the same direction.
So it's pretty much a situation where Jim Knowles says this is the way we're playing defense, and then the safeties coach and the cornerbacks coach have to get together and pretty much align with and then teach individuals and teach coordination of that secondary in line with obviously Jim Knowles' defense. So he's coordinating the defense. So Kevin, your comment about having just one secondary coach, is that more about coordination or is that more about resources being allocated elsewhere?
I don't know. I think that there's just a way to stack your staff that just makes a little bit more sense. And somebody might sit there and say, okay, well, what are you saying then? You want like a defensive ends coach and a defensive tackles coach? You're just doing the same thing, just moving it down 2 levels. I think that Ohio State needs to make sure that it loads up its defensive staff a little bit more when you have an offensive-minded head coach in Ryan Day and how that whole situation is there on that side of the ball. I would rather see my secondary all getting the same coaching, the same messaging, whatever that may be. So I've never really been a huge fan of breaking them up at that point. I just don't think that you gain a lot from it.